Can you hear me from here?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.
Hello, I am Lynae, and this is?
Kenton from Fun Kit Toys.
So I just want to do a little quick disclaimer before we start. Everybody know, I'm personally live streaming this. If you would like to ask a question and you do not want to be recorded, like, I don't know, raise both hands or something, and I'll have Susan cover up the microphone briefly so that your voice is not captured. I just wanted to make sure that that is made clear. The live recording will be kept publicly on my social media just for other educators and bloggers to ever refer to if they want to. It will not be used by any companies. Also to clarify that my presence here at this conference is sponsored by SheVibe, and they have their input on what I'm about to say. They are not related at all to this panel. Jim just thought that needed to be mentioned. I may mention their stock and what they carry in my discussion, and that's pretty much because they're the store that I recommend most to people because they have a large selection, and not because I work for them or am owned by them, as some new Reddit conspiracy theories suggest. And some of the points that we're going to be talking about today were brought about by the Body Safe panel from last year.
Heavy air quotes. Real big ones.
And this was conceived by Sarah Goodnight. Some of you may have known her as Rudy Goodnight in the Stores for Noxie. Now it's for RGN Toys. And unfortunately, she could not be here with us due to family emergency, so Kent and I are going to do our best. Not screw it up.
I run Fun Kit Toys LLC. It's literally just me, but I'm not going to use this for any kind of profit.
He just has fun silicone that he's going to pour.
No, I'm going to be doing a live pouring of no frillos today.
How much will it cost?
$24.
So you can get affordable silicone. It exists. It is not, as was tried to be stressed last year, it is not a prohibitively expensive material. It can be, absolutely. There are artists out there pouring amazing designs. Some of Kevin's more elaborate designs cost more. But it is absolutely possible to have body safe, affordable toys, and that's something else that we're going to be talking about today.
And like, to take that further, I don't buy in any kind of fantastic bulk. I buy the $24 no frillo silicone in 10-gallon kits. A company buying silicone in 100,000 gallons, 55-gallon drums, anything like that, could fairly easily get a more affordable silicone down to cost at mass production level.
So it is not, you don't feel that there's any reason why we can't expect to see $15 dildos on the market that are absolutely silicone?
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
One of the points that I wanted to start out talking about is what they started out talking about last year. They said that toxic is a misuse of the language, that it is too harsh of a word for us as educators and reviewers to be using with blanket proclamations to scare people off from using porous material sex toys. So by that, I'm talking about PVC and QPR and what is just generically called jelly. Toxic, as they said, is relative and it's inaccurate, and you know, everything is toxic. Water is toxic. It's not enough information on its own. This is true. And there have been more recent sex toy lab test studies done in 2014 by Smith and Kitten, and I think a Swedish study in 2016. And they absolutely did find hardly any phthalates in use. Why a lot of us still use this term toxic is because we do want to kind of scare people away from using this, not because you're necessarily going to get cancer, but because we hear so much stories from other people who were perhaps scared off from using a sex toy because it burned their bits, or they started getting more yeast infections and didn't make the connection between the two. And people don't know that, yes, it's absolutely legal. There's nothing illegal about it. They can sell material that is not best for your body. And so when we have to say terms like toxic, yes, we're trying to get your attention. But it is for a very good reason, because we don't want you to be scared off from using sex toys. We want you to have the best ones available that you can afford. So.
The porosity of the blanket jelly rubber toys, TP, TPR, which are two terms for roughly the same thing. Elastomers and rubbers are just different terms for things that do the bendiness, and just polymers that can bend and stretch. And the porosity means that they are essentially impossible to clean and sanitize. Things, microbes, pathogens, fungi get in them, and you're not going to get them out. It's just not a feasible thing because it absorbs water, it absorbs moisture, it absorbs cells of harmful organisms, and over the course of time, you're going to start seeing like black spots of mold, and even in like non-moist environments.
Yeah.
Like you have a test talking about that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas silicone, it does have pores at the material level, but it is a hydrophobic material. The water doesn't get into those pores, and so nothing grows in them.
No water, no food.
Yeah.
Death.
I was up until last December food safety certified. I trained classically as a chef, so I've done a lot of food safety classes. The things that cause things to grow in something are food, acidity, temperature, time, oxygen, and moisture. Moisture is very important. If it doesn't have moisture on the surface or in pores, it's not going to grow in there. So.
And you can see mold grow on silicone on the surface.
Yeah, but
that doesn't mean that anything bad is going to happen. You can use a 10% bleach solution and it'll be gone. You can feel safe that it's not going to harm your body anymore because it's not living in the pores, it's just on the surface. I am famous for leaving food in the refrigerator way too long. And I can tell you, those silicone lids, they absolutely do grow mold, but they never show signs of retaining that mold. There's no smell, there's no black spots, nothing bad happens after I bleach it and wash it.
the mycelium doesn't grow roots into the material.
That is the more scientific way of saying.
And speaking of science, who wants to do some? So, I brought some silicone, and I'm going to do a little live no-frildo pouring and explain some stuff about silicone while I'm doing it. So, platinum silicone, there are three catalysts for silicone. There's tincture, which you use in all your bathrooms for all the caulking, and that's tin catalyst silicone. It absorbs moisture from the atmosphere to cure and releases acetic acid as part of the curing process. Then there's platinum cure silicone, which does not take anything in or let anything out, which is why it's great for doing mold things, because it doesn't really change in size in any meaningful way, like 0.001 millimeter size difference for once it's cured. It comes as a two-part liquid. One has the vinyl groups. They both have silicone in them, like dimethylsiloxane, and then one has the platinum catalyst. You mix them together, the platinum catalyzes the reaction, and it cures in cross-links. Silicone is, and I'm going to get into this in a slightly less technical thing, a cross-link chaining polymer. It has a silicone backbone rather than a carbon backbone. It forms long chains once it's catalyzed, and those chains form a structure which causes it to solidify. More dimethicone in this will spread that structure out and make it softer. So you have soft silicones like you could maybe make a sleeve out of. There's no reason that you need to make a sleeve out of PPR when you can do this with platinum silicone. This is certified skin-safe material. It's used largely in special effects makeup. It's sold by a lot of companies. This is not very expensive for me to get. And this is a prototype of a sleeve I'm making. There's no reason you can't make a sleeve out of this material. So any claims that TP and TPR are necessary for that, I don't see how.
Yes, that was something that was mentioned last year, was that, you know, that's why they're trying to still work with them and push them, because you cannot get the feel and the softness from silicone. Yes, you can. This is stretchy. This is exactly as stretchy as those TPR jelly cock rings.
Yeah. And the material information sheets on that say it will stretch to 800% of its length before it snaps. We can't stretch it that far. We're not strong enough as human beings, but it can. They do tons and tons of lab testing, and they figure out exactly what the thing can handle.
Can you imagine a little robot that's like pulling the end of this thing? Let's see that.
Okay.
All right, so while he is
Yeah.
getting that together, another language point that you'll see a few different terminologies for is when the term body safe is used. That was the title of their session last year. It is a term that gets thrown around with various meanings. Depends on who you talk to. A lot of retailers and manufacturers have taken to use the term body safe to describe anything that basically lacks latex or phthalates per the manufacturer's claims. So this means that you can see body safe terms listed for, I even have seen a PVC item that says it's body safe PVC. It's still porous. Now Blush is making a couple of PVC items that are considered non-porous. So that is the only time that I would actually consider PVC to be body safe because it's non-porous. That is my definition for body safe, is non-porous. Something that will not cause harm, or will harm only the smallest portion of people, like for example those with a silicone allergy. And there will be the rare times when we will hear about somebody reporting a burning sensation from a silicone sex toy. I have a feeling that that is probably due to them forgetting to thoroughly wash your silicone sex toy when you first get it. Because during the manufacturing process, there can still be chemicals left on it, and that can irritate you, of course. There's also a chance that somebody's reacting to the lube and they don't know it because they don't know that you can have a reaction from lube if the pH is off or the ingredients are less than ideal.
So another thing about pigments, throughout history, many pigments have been used and still are that are not super safe. I get all mine pigments that are certified for use on the eyes and lips by the FDA for cosmetics. And I find, like, same with using food-safe silicone. Food-safe silicone is tested in acetone, oil, ethyl alcohol, and water, and if anything leaches out that is harmful in any of those substances, it's not safe for food storage and food-making usage, so it isn't safe. Digestion is a far more chemically intimate and absorbent process than sex, so pretty good method for determining safety, I find. If it's safe to go through your body from here all the way back, it's probably safe to just go back there. So, I make a lot of my own pigments. This is a nice cosmetics grade neon orange. Some of you may have worn it on your lips already. A lot of indie makers get from this supplier. So, this is just mixed with uncross-linked dimethicone. And when I say dimethicone, I mean silicone is its own molecule, and then to make the chains, it gets linked to methyls, and then the chains form with a bond between those with the methyls coming off either side. And it forms, the reason it's more elastic than carbon-based polymers, silicone can substitute in a lot of molecules where carbon goes, but silicon has a much stronger bond to oxygen, and that results in a slightly longer distance between the individual atoms, and it also results in a different angle, like a slightly wider angle, which makes for a more flexible chain of molecules, and that's why it's rubbery, whereas there are carbon-based polymers that are otherwise, other than the silicon instead of the carbon, pretty much identical, and they're not nearly as flexible. It's a very, very different structure. So I'm about to pour the other half of the silicone in. It'll set up in 6 minutes, and then, so that I can't pour it, and then it'll be completely cured in half an hour. And that's another reason I can make the no-frillos so inexpensively, is because I can churn a bunch of them out. Got anything you want to say on anything?
What causes, this flame cast is something we're going to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Did you figure out what causes the gray ash when you use silicone?
The gray ash is just silica, fine silica powder. a scientific term that's used for it is silica fume, because it behaves differently. Like you cannot get silica powder that fine in just about any other way other than like burning things that silica type molecule is in. So replug this in. We're just going to get a little bit of orange on your battery. We can have that.
That's fine. We'll try battle scars and remind me. So has anybody here done the flame test on their own at home? And so one of the issues that we've had with it is that I feel like 8 years or so ago when we first started talking about it, we didn't know everything that there was to know about it, and I still don't think that we do. But back then, when Metis of Cantus was first doing the flame test, she was doing it on, I believe, just RTV, room temperature vulcanization, silicone, which is what this is. There are other types and softness levels, like this, that will behave differently in a flame test than these solid dildos that he's pouring here. But there are constants that I have found that now have not changed. If you can catch a flame to the silicone, and you can't, always. For example, the head of the dildo, there's no sharp edges, there's no thin parts, there's nothing to catch on fire. But when it starts to burn a little bit and smolder, that's where you're gonna get gray ash. Otherwise, you're just gonna get the black smudging leftovers from your lighter. But always, a TPR or PVC toy will burn like an oil lamp because it has oil in it. It has oil that's going to burn. It has the ability to also, then because it's plastic, it will melt. I have even flame tested super cheap silicone items that I bought on Amazon for $10, and it hasn't melted. I'm not sure what type of silicone we would need to test to actually see it melt. Somebody has claimed that it can happen. I haven't seen it happen yet. And other people have asked about colors of the flame. That's not, from in my experience, ever been an indication of purity or type of silicone. Is basically, did you wash it? Because people will flame test it with graded added packaging to make sure, and forget to wash it. Because of the chemicals on that side of the toy will cause different color flames.
So I didn't bring a spatula because I'm a genius, so I'm going to mix this by hand. Who wants a high five after that? Yeah, cool. I hope you like orange goo. And I'll just like, everyone get a nice look at this rolling around in here. It's a lot of fun. I always enjoy this material.
Kind of looks like that Nickelodeon slime stuff right now.
It is very much like that. Now normally I degas this for a few minutes, so these are going to have some bubbles, but they're also going to be just kind of around after this, and maybe I'll toss them into the audience if anyone particularly wants to know for a little.
What do you mean by degassing?
Degassing, I put it in a vacuum chamber. Some also use pressure chambers to make the bubbles small and dissolve into the material. I pull the bubbles out by putting them in. It's literally just a cooking pot, but I have like a nitrile rubber sheet and an acrylic sheet over top of, and then some holes drilled in and pressure equipment and a tube to the vacuum pump. It creates negative pressure. It causes the bubbles in the silicone of air to expand, pop, and then you don't have big bubbles in the pour.
Could vibration be a substitute to vacuum pressure?
I don't find vibration as a viable substitute, especially for quick pouring. A lot of people use vibration when pouring silicone to get the bubbles to the top, but this is no longer a mobile substance in like 6 minutes. So for longer cures, it can be, but I've never found it to be effective enough for my particular methods, even for the hour-long cure.
This one's for Lily. For those who don't know what the flame test is, would you mind explaining it?
So, a lot of people think that for the flame test, you need to hold the flame up to it for quite some time. You actually don't. You're going to get a reaction in about 5 seconds or less. That's about how long it will take for a TPR or PVC sex toy to start burning on its own. As that burns, you will then see the plastic start to melt. And for silicone, after 5 seconds on a smooth surface, if nothing has happened, it's not gonna happen. You're just gonna make it more black from the residue from your lighter. Otherwise, if it's on something more stretchy that has more dimethicone in it, it's an edge, it's gonna smolder, and that's it. But we use this flame test to, I guess, feel better about knowing what is going into our body, because there is still no regulation, which I will talk about in a minute, about sex toy materials. They can say that it's silicone on the box if it's not. We're seeing this more right now on Amazon, where there's a lot of dissonance between the language they're using. We will see it called TPR and silicone in the same listing. Most retailers now and manufacturers have stopped trying to fool us that way. But that has been something. We've also seen it called silica gel on Amazon, which is not a material. It's the little packets that you find in your handbag or your shoes. It's not a dildo material. But that flame test is pretty much our only way at home to know what we're using. And that's basically, otherwise you have to pay hundreds of dollars for a lab test, or just only buy from the brands and retailers that we trust. Yeah, boring? Yep.
Yeah, so this will be done in about 25 minutes. I'll just set a little.
Would you mind moving the smooth on box so that see
I can turn it around, yeah. But I don't want to take it off the cardboard because I don't want to ruin this lovely tablecloth.
thank you.
So yeah, this is the part A, this is the part B. I might have gotten that backwards, but it doesn't matter. I did, that's part A, that's part B. You just mix these two together 50-50, depending on the blend. It can be either 50-50, 10 to 100. This isn't a particularly picky or sensitive blend of silicone. It's just mixed by volume. I usually weigh everything by grams anyway because it's baking. So you just mix those two together. The way that you mix silicone together is when you think it's mixed, then keep going. And then you add the pigment to one part, mix that in, mix it all together, and then pour it. I usually also vacuum degas it just to get bubbles out. But another fun thing, so you know how silicone is staticky and gets cat hair all over it? It's staticky as a liquid too, and if anyone wants to get a closer look at that, there are little droplets streaming off of this and coming back down toward the base because of the static field around it. When I mix it with a toothpick or something and get a little bit of silicone on the toothpick, it will rise up out of there. I can also wave the toothpick over it and the bubbles will try and reach toward it and pop.
Yes. Is there anything you can add into the silicone, on the side of ships they'll put a piece of zinc on it to prevent everything else from rusting? Is there anything you could do to static everything with that?
I've never tried, and I couldn't tell you.
Well, there are a whole lot of silicone sex toys out there that we don't entirely know their process. I know that one coating is polyurethane, and then the surface of the silicone will be soft and powdery and pretty darn resistant to cat fur. So I don't think that that's something that the smaller indie manufacturers can do, but the big companies, absolutely. I don't know what to call it, but
No.
that's the other issue. Yes? Yes.
Yeah, so some of that texture on a silicone toy has to do with the mold. The mold can be really smooth, or the mold can be sanded almost, and then it comes out feeling kind of, depending on what kind of texture they give the inside of the mold. And then the other silicone process is injection molding, which looks like the silicone is more waxy and it looks like a waffle maker. So they would have a waffle maker, they open it up and there's sex toys. And that's what most of the silicone toys with electronics laminate, just like your cell phone case or something. They make the injection molding thing. But you were saying with the flame test, if they haven't washed it, sometimes it'll flame up with a different color.
Yeah.
And that's because a lot of the bigger companies they'll injection mold or they'll hand pour it and then they'll put it in a detergent bath. And that detergent bath will, like a rock tumbler, I don't know if there's any other geology fans out there, but it will tumble it and take the tabs and little extra bits from the mold off of it. And then they don't wash it, so you get it and it may have a scent, and that's the
Yeah, that was not something that will occur to most people, and I get that because we think silicone is awesome and great, and it is, but so all should.
Yeah, silicone is still primarily used as a mold making material. It is in your kitchens now, it's in your sex toys, it's in almost every room of your house, but it's also mainly used to make molds. And what part of the reason for that is because it will get every single little detail. You have a tiny little scratch on like an otherwise mirror polished mold, the silicone's going into that scratch, the scratch will show up on whatever you're making. Whatever texture you have, I smooth my molds out I use ABS plastic to mold, and I use acetone to smooth it out. It sort of dissolves the surface and gives it a really glossy finish. You can see, and then I use soap and water to extract it. When the water evaporates, it leaves minerals behind, and you can see the patches where there used to be water drops because you can see like a little circle where there's a slight, like not as shiny bit because there's a thin layer of however many little mineral deposits were in that one drop of water. That's how sensitive silicone is as a mold making material.
So what, the silicone that you use, is it, like FDA approved or
Yeah,
anything?
so the main silicone I use is FDA certified food safe. This is certified skin safe. It's dragon skin. It's primarily used for prop making, and it's going to be an external toy. This is primarily an external toy. But as a chef, I also learned to read material safety data sheets. I go through those. There's not anything known to the state of California to cause cancer. There's not anything known to cause reproductive harm. It's all safe materials. I have safe pigments. The other thing is, we named this panel Platinum Grade Sex Toy Myths. That's the first myth. Platinum isn't a grade of silicone. It is a method of curing it. It sounds shiny, but platinum grade isn't above gold grade and silver grade. Like there's peroxide cure, which is used in a lot of manufacturing stuff. There is tin cure, which is used in your bathroom, and then there's platinum cure. The grades of silicone are not something inherent necessarily to the silicone itself. It is the testing that that company has paid for that blend of silicone to undergo. People say medical grade a lot. There are many medical grades of silicone. Something can be medical grade for implantation up to 29 days. Something can be medical grade for making equipment. A silicone blend can be medical grade for prosthetics. Softer silicones are often graded for prosthetics because it's the soft, pushy thing between the person's skin and the actual object. So there are a lot of different medical grades as well. Food grade, as I said earlier, it's tested in ethyl alcohol, acetone oil, and water for anything leaching out of that. There are also things tested for skin safety because the reason a silicone blend is brought by the company for testing for a specific purpose is because they made it for that purpose and they anticipate selling it for that purpose. So prop making uses a lot of silicones. They test it for skin safety for like all the monster masks you see in movies. Those are largely made of silicone, some still with latex as well. So whatever the anticipated use is, that's what it's tested for. That's what they pay exorbitant amounts of money for it to go through approval for. And that's what has been done to determine each given thing. Now with this silicone, I wanted to go for something lower cost. So I read all the material safety data sheets for a bunch of silicones, and this one has no warnings, nothing in the OSHA safety beyond like things to keep it from getting in your mouth if you spill it somewhere. It's totally safe, but it is not graded for anything. So I put that information out there. It is determined by me to be safe, but it hasn't undergone a whole bunch of testing, so I can get it at a cheaper price and sell it at a cheaper price after that. Companies make their blends of silicone for specific purposes. This one is primarily for mold making. My other one is primarily for food storage. This one is for special effects makeup, and they're all dildos now.
Do you know if there is any superiority to buying a sex toy that claims to be medical grade versus food grade?
It depends on how super secure you want to be. I personally, as a former chef and as someone who's studied a lot of the sexuality stuff, find that food grade is sufficient. However, if you want to be extra careful, if you have the money to spend on medical grade toys, that's your prerogative. I don't personally see it as being a superior thing. especially because it becomes more cost prohibitive. Medical testing versus food testing is a whole nother layer of FDA approval, and that's also very expensive. But it's about how comfortable you feel with that evaluation.
Now, I have been told by one company that anybody in the sex toy industry who is claiming to be using medical grade silicone is probably not telling the truth. That it's usually food grade because of the cost issue. What do you think?
I don't see any reason why that would be. I don't see why someone would do that, because that feels like more of an opening to liability than an actual like profitable lie. But it's possible. It seems unlikely.
Okay. So when we're talking about the FDA, we also have to talk about something that a lot of people bring up a lot. When I say to someone's floor that nobody is regulating what a sex toy company can put on the box, what they can advertise anywhere on the web. Well, who's regulating it? Why can't the government control this and protect us? I do not want the FDA in my sex toys. I absolutely do not. And the reason for that is because, well, I have 2 points to make. First of all, KY lube is FDA approved. We have dubbed it vagina poison. It's high osmolality, a lot of parabens. It's usually not pH balanced. FDA testing requirements for lubricants basically determines that they're non-toxic, but are not sensitive enough to predict the effects of the epithelial layer of the mucous membranes, whether it will burn you, whether it will cause you to get more frequent yeast infections. And there's also a large list of products and ingredients that it's known as the Generally Regarded as Safe, GRAS list, by the FDA. But they're also known as irritants, sensitizers, and allergens. A sensitizer means you can be using it for a couple months, year, and be okay, and then all of a sudden your body just becomes more and more sensitive to it. So you have used KY when you were a college kid and didn't have any problems, but now you do. That could be why. The FDA also approved nonoxynol,
Non-optimal.
9.
Yeah.
That was actually shown to increase STI transmission. The FDA approved it. Why would we want to trust them with our sex toys? What are they going to tell us? And the other biggest issue with the FDA approval for a sex toy is the cost. I have been told that the fees for each product will be anywhere from $5,000 to $300,000 per item. Imagine a company like Blush, even Candace, there's too many products, there's too many different individual products, they could never afford it. A company like Funkit could never even exist if every sex toy had to be tested. And also, this FDA testing would require animal testing. And if you don't want to do that, you have to go to great lengths and involve a lot more time and money to prove you don't need animal testing. FDA approval can also take years. So between the time frame and the cost, we would have so few options on the market, so few companies, we would never see the artistic dildo designs that you would find on, say, Ninja Sexology's blog. You would not find these things. It would not exist if the FDA got in the business of sex toys. And that's why I keep telling people, no, we don't want the FDA. We need to talk about it and educate ourselves and other people. And
we need to demand better of the companies that
Yes.
do exist. A lot of indie makers are very interested in making their materials and their toys safe. I talk to other makers all the time about what I figured out about pigment safety and pass all that information on when I can. Anything that I discover through research, no matter how extensive, I put that out there because I want other people to be making cool things. One of my values as a person, which I bring to my company, is more cool people making more cool things is a good thing. So I try and enable that as much as possible.
does anybody have any questions they want to ask about sex toy myths you've heard? Do you want more information on? Or this talk a lot? Yes. Are you okay with being on the board?
Yes.
Okay.
I I know that there is a myth, I know it has been debunked, but maybe talk about, the myth that silicone toys can't touch each other and be stored next to each other. If you wanna talk
You may
about
have
that?
noticed when I walked in that I had this going on.
Yes.
I've had toys that I made 2.5 years ago that like didn't work. There was cat hair in it, some pigment got out on the side, that I've been touching since then. I can still shake the box around and everything rolls out.
This jar of cut up silicone products was put together in 2014. This has been in the jar. I have never moved anything for 4 years. I can take out every single item and show that there is absolutely no change, no discoloration, no damage. It's all perfectly fine. One thing that I like to remind people is silicone is everywhere right now. Go to your kitchen. Look at all your spatulas that are in your drawers. They are happily living there. They are living on the shelves of all these kitchen stores. They're fine. It's not a problem. This myth came about probably 9-10 years ago, and before that, when many more companies were saying, oh, this is silicone, it's TPR, which would lead to this. When TPR and PVC live together and touch each other, the little oils come out and commingle, and I don't even know what chemical thing is happening, and it makes monster babies. It does, and it pulls the oils out of the other toy next to it, and then they start to melt and go blue.
I once read
That's the technical term.
I once read an article by museum curators of like mid-century design, back when plastics were like first coming out and designers were getting their hands on them and making fascinating and beautiful new furniture out of them. Those pieces are degrading in wildly unpredictable ways, and it was about just the ingenuity of the people charged with preserving them. But that's just this. Like, there were a lot of plastics that came out when plastics were first starting to be a thing that no one knew how they were going to break down and age. And now we know a lot more about that, and that's what's happening in that jar. Another thing I want to touch on is myths and beliefs about silicone toys and silicone lube. This kind of silicone, all the silicones that I've ever worked with, I've tested with every silicone lube I can get a sample of. What happens is, at first, nothing. The reason that this is softer than that is largely in part to a larger amount of dimethicone that doesn't catalyze in the mixture, getting between all of the lovely cross links that give it structure and expanding that and causing it to be more flexible. Silicone that is cured can also absorb that dimethicone and cause it to become part of that structure. And what happens is it becomes slightly larger and softer. So when I have a jar with a butt plug in it, and I dump all the Uber lube that I've ever gotten samples of in there, after a month, it's about 20% larger and 20% softer. So what that's doing is, if you're wearing a butt plug for long term, or using a silicone toy in any non-lubricating hole, and you use silicone lube, it can absorb that lubricant and leave you without any. Another thing is it's going to expand a bit, it's going to become a little bit softer, and what that means is it doesn't have the exact strength that is specified on the material data sheets. So, you know, maybe this has like 800% stretching tensile strength. It's not going to have that anymore. It's not going to be as resistant to tearing. Silicone as a material is not particularly resistant to tearing. If it gets a little nick in it, that can spread very easily. It's going to be even less so if you absorb dimethicone into it. So the idea that silicone toys and silicone lube are incompatible is sort of true, but in a different way than a lot of people believe.
My burning question about that is, does it affect the safety of the toy? Can it still be, can it still be boiled? Can it still be disinfected and
Yes.
used and considered?
Still non-porous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still non-porous. Silicone and water do not mix, so it being absorbed into the structure is just the same as if it was just already a softer silicone. It's not going to make gaps for water to come in after that. It can still be boiled, it can still be bleached. You can still throw it in a steam autoclave if you want. All the ways that silicone can be sanitized are still applicable.
But do you think that it would, you said it makes it more able to tear.
Yeah.
So do you think then that you could create microscopic tears that you don't see that could hold some?
I doubt they're going to make microscopic tears in silicone because they will quickly become macroscopic ones.
Okay.
That's just how silicone rolls.
What you said about it being happening over time is really sort of helpful. My problem I've found is with hybrid lubes. Like, oh, they're hybrid, they're fine, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, my toys are a little bit softer.
Yeah.
And
It's
for
not-
a long time, I used hybrid lubes and had no issues because most of them, you should maybe look at the ingredient list and make sure the dimethicone is farther down the list, so there's less of it in there. There is one hybrid lube that the dimethicone is more closer to the top of the list, so it would have more in it.
The biggest offender for me was lubricated condoms that were lubricated with silicone lube, and I wasn't paying attention.
And you saw it.
And I actually noticed some of my toys sort of getting slimy, and yeah.
Yeah, especially like Uberlube also has vitamin E in that, and that can leave a little bit of residue on the surface, I find. The other thing is, over time, it will absorb it directly into the surface, but over time that will be distributed evenly throughout the toy. That can take months, but it's osmosis. It's the same way that water moves throughout your body. It gets absorbed into the surface, it gets absorbed deeper in. So like the butt plug that I put in the jar, after probably 18 hours, the whole base of it, because it's like, it thins out into a narrow point for the suction cup, the whole base is like how a potato chip has like wiggles and waves in it, because the edges had expanded and the center had not. Over time, it simply it got us a larger resting size, but it was the same proper shape and it wasn't as bendy and wiggly because the silicone distributed evenly throughout.
If a toy is a little bit too firm for your preference, is this a method of softening it up?
It is a thing you can do. I just advise that you are weakening the structure because you're spreading out the same amount of cross-linked chains over a larger area.
And I have had people tell me, especially for those who have used butt plugs for a little bit longer than just a few minutes, that they had trouble removing the plug when they use silicone lube. So I now stop recommending silicone lube for silicone toys if you're using them anally, simply because you don't want that to happen. It's incredibly painful. So that is an issue. Or was there any brands of silicone lube that you've ever tested that had lasting damage? Like I think we were told to look for stickiness or weird meltiness kind of.
No, I've never encountered any. I've used lubes with dimethicone. I've used lubes with cyclosiloxane of various kinds. Cyclosiloxane, by the way, is just a ring of silicone molecules. It's just a bonded ring. There's like cyclopentasiloxane, which is 5 in just a ring rather than a longer chain. And then dimethicone is, dimethylsiloxane, just a silicone molecule with a methyl group on either side. So that's what those like big, large, maybe frightening words on lube bottles mean.
And another myth that I spent a lot of time talking about, we have no idea where this originated. People would tell you to use condoms on porous sex toys as a way to make it more okay. Maybe it wouldn't burn you, maybe whatever is living in there wouldn't transfer to your body. I don't know. I don't feel that there's any good reason to keep doing it. To use it on a silicone sex toy when you're in a sharing situation to keep it clean, yeah, great. But there's absolutely nothing scientific that is telling us that the chemicals that may be in a porous sex toy or the microorganisms, we don't know, scientifically speaking, that can or cannot transfer through the condom barrier. I did a test with a latex condom on a TPR sex toy that felt slightly oily, and after a few hours, that condom looked real bad. It looked thinner, and then it was easy to tear. So then I think you should, if you're going to do that, you absolutely must do that. Try a polyurethane condom because they don't react with oil. Yes?
Someone on the live stream is asking, does this redistribution of dimethicone affect dual density toys?
The thing that I've found with dimethicone absorbing into silicone is each given blend is designed in various ways to be its firmness, so it can only change like how soft it is, how much dimethicone is in it, so much. The structure will only support so much absorption. So with dual density toys, there's a much firmer silicone and softer silicone on the outside. There will probably be some transfer between those layers just naturally over time, but it won't be to the extent that it's just all going to be one density.
Yeah.
Because there are other things going on in the silicone blend that make this soft and make that other one firm. They have a variety of other things going on, which I know a great deal less about. I have no degree in material science. That will prevent that from becoming a huge issue.
How's your dildos?
Let's find out. They need a little more time.
Okay. So another argument in favor of non-toxic porous materials last year was they talked about the cost, which I mentioned earlier. They're harping on silicone, saying that when we are recommending all the silicone, we're recommending prohibitively expensive items. That's not accurate anymore. When
$24.
He's only at $24. When I looked at SheVibe, I was able to count approximately 480 different items that were priced at $35 or less. That is not every $35 or less sex toy is not on SheVibe, so there are probably even more. And one of the companies that is coming up and making a big space in the market for lower cost non-porous materials is Lush, Hideki, back there. And we can't ignore these kind of companies because they are providing truly body safe sex toys for an affordable price, and that's what we need to get out there. So are the cheap vibrators gonna be rumbly or powerful? Maybe, maybe not. They're not gonna be the best vibrators, but not a damn thing wrong with that $15 silicone dildo you can get, or the $10 silicone butt plug. Maybe the design sucks, but there's nothing wrong with the material. And so there is not, in my opinion, a decent economic argument for TPR.
Especially because over time, TPR will absorb, ambient microbes, it'll grow mold, and then after a while, you're gonna have to replace it
Yes.
anyway.
You do, Ducky?
Well, what I love, I was a blogger before I worked for Blush, but bloggers are disruptors, right? Ken is a disruptor, and Blush is also a disruptor. We're 12 years old as a company, but we're also the actual manufacturer. We manufacture in China, we own our own manufacturing plant, and one of the problems that a lot of these companies have is they don't manufacture their own products, they're importers. So they have one layer of cost built into their business model that the consumers have to absorb. So that's one way that we disrupt. But the other thing that when we talk about them mislabeling their packages, oftentimes they'll go to a manufacturer in China and they say, I want this design, I want it silicone. They make the prototypes, they get their first shipment, it's all silicone. But business and capitalism makes it so that we beat these Chinese manufacturers over the head for price so heavily that they in turn retaliate by undermining the material. So the first shipment, the first container comes in over the ocean and you've got silicone toys in all the right packaging. The second set comes in and maybe the manufacturer themselves have degraded material in order to give back that 3 cents. And if they don't do a quality control and independently lab test, they don't even know the second shipment is different from the first shipment. And so it gets very complex. And then on top of that, China is such a vast, huge place, it's hard to regulate anything, from food to anything. And so even getting raw materials for our manufacturing plant, we have to test the raw materials because between the maker and the distribution method, they could have, almost like people do with cocaine, right? They could have split that and turned it into something else so it arrives at our manufacturing. We have to test the raw materials to make sure it is what the
North Carolina or Pennsylvania, depending on which one wants to ship it to me.
But I try to find empathy and understanding and then try to figure out who we can trust, you know?
Right.
That, at the end of the day, it's like, who can we trust? And I think that's what happened last year in why we put it together, right? Is that
Yes.
trust was degraded.
Absolutely, absolutely. I also wanted to find out, is there anybody here who feels comfortable talking about it, who works at a retail store, who has issues with talking to customers about trying to sway them one way towards silicone and away from the TPR? Do they not care? Like, have you found anything that works more than? Yes, Carly.
I've had this issue more so in lower income areas. I've worked in the Bronx and I've worked in like the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And a lot of times it's not just a cost thing, it's the fact that they know these toys, they've seen these toys, this is what they're familiar with. So it's really hard to talk someone out of something that they've owned since they're like 16 and you're like, this is possibly giving you like yeast infections. There was actually a woman that came into my shop that she had just come out of the hospital because she had given herself like a cervical infection from the toy that she was using. And she was coming to rebuy it. And I was like, oh, I will give you like the most discount I can give you just to get something that's going to be safe for you so that you don't go back to the hospital. So like, I don't even feel like a lot of it is the fact that they're like, they don't care about their body or anything. It's just like, this is what I know, this is what I'm comfortable with, this is what has always worked for me. And like, sometimes they are just like, they don't believe you that you know better, especially if they are older and you're younger than them. So it's, especially when you're
There's like a truck because you're out there trying to make.
exactly,
Yeah.
they're like, what are you trying to sell me? And I'm like, listen, it's not about the cost. Like,
Right.
I want you to go home and be safe. I don't want you to go to the hospital again.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
that was something that I got a lot on cesspool Reddit, was, oh, well, you're just pushing this stuff to make more money. Like, have you seen my blog? I shit talk a lot of silicone sex toys. I am very likely to steer you away from something. I'm not telling you to go for it just because I might make more money. No, and that's fully inaccurate. But I can understand how people are going to be jaded enough to think that. I get that, but then that's why I can point them to, God, it's probably 50% of my blog at this point that is really shady and salty and, wow, this sex toy, it sucks. It can be silicone, it still suck.
Yeah, so I feel like it's really just about finding like what it was about that toy that they love
Yeah.
and showing them options. So sometimes it's the squishiness, sometimes it's like the glitter or the color, like, so like just really listening to the customers and figuring out what about that toy that you loved and getting you a safer option.
Right. And do you ever find that there's people coming in to literally buy a sex toy for a single use?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, like in that case, yeah,
Yeah.
you're only gonna get one use out of it, unless they're super sensitive. I don't think they're gonna get a yeast infection from a single use of a TPR or PVC sex toy. They still might get some burning, but then we don't have the issues with the microorganisms. So yeah, okay, that's about the only time I'm gonna say okay. I got that. Sex toy version of pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
It's so much more fun with this one because every single one of those makes its own noise and then all the beats start coming out. My Instagram, if you find me there, has a video with all the wonderful audio, which is the main part of it. That's one of my favorite molds to pull things out of. But yeah, one of the ways that I make this these silicone toys less expensive is to use a less expensive silicone. The main way is that it cures in half an hour to the 24 hours of my other toys to the 3 hours of those ones. And the other thing is I've designed the molds to be as quickly reusable and as easy to demold as possible. My other toys, I require soap and water to remove them all, pretty much all of them. With silicone, on silicone molds, you require mold releases, which are, they've got a lot of warnings on them, but they don't soak into the silicone, you just have to wash them off. It's important to wash your toys before you use them. Even if the manufacturer does, just do it again, it's great. You know, you wash your produce when you bring it home, even if it says pre-wash. Just wash stuff before you put it in your body, it's a good idea. So when I've been learning about mold making while I've been doing this. This has been a dream of mine since I started, is to make a nice low budget silicone dildo. I figured out how to make the molds easier to pull things out of, and there you have it. I got all 3 of those out in under a minute, and I usually pour 6 at a time and then do the next batch. So yeah, we have some orange no frill doughs. Does anyone want a thing hurled at them? Your hand went up first. All right, what's your poison?
The one on that side.
Bucket one?
Yeah.
A B
That's a
in
good
orange.
choice.
I've never made
That's a
orange no
good
frill doughs
choice.
before. I figure I'm only going to do them at events. Have fun.
you.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, you are enthusiastic. Okay. Who's next?
This is pretty
Who's going to do a wiggly dance or something? Hey. Okay. You want to catch it?
No.
Okay.
What is it about me that says I have hand-eye coordination?
That's hysterical. That's good.
Yes. Question?
So it's funny that you mentioned the problem about, I'm a retailer, I have 2 stores in this area. One of my stores is in a lower income area, and we recently remodeled the store, moved to a whole bigger space, and as I've been becoming a more educated retailer and doing my research, I've been moving away from certain products and buying more silicone products and trying to get all the way to just that. But my customers come in and say, oh, you guys got fancy, you got brand new, now you increased their prices and everything. So that has really been a difficulty. So I'm glad that you addressed that, because that's been a problem of mine. And another question I have is, what are your feelings about, because certain companies have proprietary materials, like let's say Fleshlight, and you don't really it doesn't really say what it is.
Right.
So how do you know what it is?
Fleshlight is one of the many just kinds of a thermoplastic elastomer of an unknown variety. We don't know what's in it. We just know that it is in fact porous. I don't know enough about their blend because they don't publish these sorts of things to tell you whether there's anything toxic in it. But the main thing that we do know is that it is porous. You have to clean them really extensively, and even if you do, over time it's going to absorb things and things can grow in it.
You would need to pay for a lab test to deformulate this. On the blog page that I created, that's linked to from my Twitter account, there are some links in one of my articles to a couple of the lab tests that have been performed. Some of those lab tests, the paperwork did list what the material was. I couldn't pronounce it. I don't know what these things are. We just know it is classified way up here as a thermoplastic elastomer / rubber, same thing. And then down here we have all these different kinds. The only thing that we know about them is that for whatever reason, the thermoplastic elastomer doesn't need phthalates to be softened like PVC used to. That's the only difference. Yes, Ducky, you can add.
Yeah, I can speak to both TPE and PVC. First of all, if you ask an importer what their products are made out of and they don't know, they feel dumb. And oftentimes they can't know. And so we put them on the spot and we humiliate them, not even by trying, right? So that's one of the exchanges we have when we try to ask somebody what it's made out of, and they think they know, but they don't really know. But then PVC and TPE are both compounds. They are recipes. And so if they have to have a certain amount of things to qualify as TPE, one of which is oil, which is what people see on a napkin or a paper towel. If you put a toy down and then there's like, what's this oily spot? And I washed it and it still made a spot. So it's a leaching oil. But PVC is also a compound. So every company will have their own recipe. So Pipe Dream versus Calax is probably importing from 5 different manufacturing facilities. So they may have 5 different kinds of PVC. But every company has their own. So you can't compare PVC from one company even to the next company. PVC, what I learned with Blush is we try to be completely transparent. I passed all the paperwork of our products. We independently lab test everything. I passed our PVC paperwork over to Lily. Then what's in that recipe? Well, nobody RV or a newer home or a home in an earthquake area, you'll have soft tubing PVC for your water pipes. And so those are done with phthalate-free plastic softening agents, and that's what we use for our PVC. But you can't ask importers to answer that question, what's your plasticizer? You know, especially some person who works there, just do the best job they can. So it gets very complicated. Here you guys are trying to do the best job you can as writers and as educators and create an informed consumer base in a very complex industry. But it's no more complex, I'd say, than cosmetics or vitamins.
Yeah.
You know? So we do the best we can. But yeah, PPE and PVC, they'll put proprietary names on them, and of course they're keeping their cards close to their
And I mean, I feel that it's also a decent way to understand. One of the sex toys that I think is most easily to fool the naked eye at first is the realistic dildos. You can look at one that's silicone and TPR and maybe at first not know the difference. Of course, one big giveaway is that TPR realistic dildos often have painted blue veins. I don't really see any silicone manufacturers doing that. But they're going to use things like cyber skin and all these weird terms. If a company knows what they're doing, they're just going to say, this is silicone. You're not going to make up a fancy name for it. They're just going to say, what we know, this is silicone. Anyone else has questions? Yes.
I have a follow-up question that's sort of related to what you had to say. One of the problems that I find is that if you have two softer silicones with like a high dimethicone content and you store them together, the dimethicone will leach from one toy to the other, and second toy will swell. Is there any way to prevent that? Because like when I brought it up with brands that are making toys, I think because they're told that silicone will not leach the product, they just straight up told me that I'm lying and it can't happen. If you have a toy, especially something with a thin outer silicone coating, that will noticeably swell. Is there any way to prevent getting dimethicone on your hands or what?
Barriers.
Okay.
Yeah, so these, I can store these together and not have that issue because they have the exact same amount of dimethicone in them. If you leave one of these on a napkin, it will leave a ring of dimethicone because the napkin has less dimethicone in it than this does.
We've seen that happen with Vic Skin products.
Yeah.
That worried people for a while.
Yeah, it's not a problem. It's just the dimethicone leaching out of the toy because there's less in the surface it's on than there is in the toy. If that's becoming a problem for you, you just put one in a plastic bag,
Okay.
and that'll solve it.
Is there some way to like burn it off or something?
If you do that, it will become stiffer.
Okay.
But like I said earlier, like if you get a noticeable swell in one place, that's going to spread out more evenly through the toy over the next few months. It's a slow process, but it'll happen.
But there's no backing off that process. Once it starts to absorb that dimethicone, it's never going to come out unless it's
If you
that ring on the napkin.
You can try putting it on something else absorbent, like paper or something. I don't know the extent to which paper will be able to pull that back out, but it can. Like if you can leave rings on it from the dimethicone leaching out, it can absorb some. I'm not going to say that that's going to solve the problem, and I don't know the extent to which it can absorb it.
The
But
plug that you put, that you submerged and let it swell, it'll never go back to its original state, right?
no, I've never seen any change beyond the initial like redistribution of the silicone inside the matrix.
Hey, do you know anything about the doming that happens on the base of dual density dildos after a while?
My guess is that the silicones are not bonded to each other, and so the denser core is just sort of sliding through. So the reason I'm able to pull this out of the mold is because this part can contract and not have air in it, while the rigid mold inside gets pulled off until this gap is formed and then it all slides right out. The same thing can be happening inside that, where there's just like kind of a part of the tip that would have the rigid core inside that no longer does, and the rigid core is slid this way. Silicone does not always bond to other silicones. They're probably using a mold release agent for the initial part before they put it in this and pour the outer part on it. And if they don't get that all off, it can slide more easily. Yeah, that's just probably the inner part moving around inside.
And when I asked Vixen about this, they were shocked. they were like, we've not really seen that. I mean, yeah, you can kind of see this guy wobbles. It used to be a suction cup bottom, and now he wobbles. And I have another mixed skin that has never done this. But this just happened, and it had nothing to do with the way I stored it either. It just happens. We don't really, I don't know how to predict it. I've never had it happen to any other brand, dual density.
Oh, I have Tantus.
Yeah.
Oh,
Lennis
really?
has said it has something to do with the softer silicone shrinking a little bit and pulling up on the firm core, or the firm base, but I don't know that much about it.
Okay.
No.
What else do you need to ask?
So I've done a lot of research on phthalates and leading up to this material. It is, I do want to note, but they are a broad range of things. It's either, I don't know, but they're esters of phthalic acid, and that can be done in a variety of ways. The main offender that causes a lot of the problems is, I believe, DOHC. And there are a lot of different kinds, a lot of them have been researched to various extents. Some of them are used, some of them are more safe than others. But the main one that was causing a lot of the problems in PVC was, I believe it was called DOHC. Phthalates are used in a large range of things. The harmful ones are banned in food service, any kind of food storage, but they're not, unfortunately, banned in food extrusion nozzles, so like soda machines. Sometimes if there's a soft plastic part of that, there can be phthalates in it. So a lot of, the FDA has like guides on phthalate exposure, and oftentimes if you get exposed to it, it's something to do with like either your flooring or like red meat, and there are a couple of other things that can have some problems, but yeah, primarily it's going to be like exposure from like the lovely outgassing you smell from your vinyl flooring or something like that.
Some of the items that I have in this bag that hopefully at some point anybody wants to witness this, we will find time to go outside and do some flame testing. If you've never seen it or been unsure of it, I can show you what happens. This lovely guy here, this is Doc
Everybody knows
Johnson
that guy.
with Silagel, PVC with Silagel, and it stinks. It reeks. We don't actually know what Silagel is. All we know is that it's an additive that Doc Johnson claims will inhibit microorganisms from growing in the pores. In theory, you would think that that would make that type of PVC, great. That there's none of the issues that we have with the porous toys. If it can't grow anything, well, then what's the problem? We don't know that that's true. I have my doubts, and I have also talked to more than enough people who have had lasting, severe genital burns from products containing Silagel. Yes, Scarlett?
When I worked in the Bronx at the retail that had a lot more porous problems and like products problems. Yes, that also.
Fair problem.
Potato.
Like we would open up all the toys to show people and let them touch them first, even if they knew the toy was porous. And like there was a day that like I pulled out a bunch of like jelly and rubber toys, and like when I would touch them, I like mistakenly touched my face, and I got a chemical burn on my face from it. So
one woman actually wrote into me.
People still buying the product.
and they still bought
Still
it.
want it.
Oh.
One woman wrote in about how she was getting a chemical burn on the vulva and vagina, and then after she would use a sex toy, and then maybe a day or so later, her and her husband had sex, he would come away with a chemical burn on his penis. If that doesn't make you want to stop using these, I don't. I mean, they were thinking that each other was passing back an STI. It was actually leading to problems in their marriage, and they would go get tested, and there's nothing wrong with them. And she asks me, "Is this possible?" Well, I guess it is, because there's nothing else that could be causing it other than she was absolutely using something with Silagel. I know somebody else who used to distribute sex toys, and he would put a Silagel containing item in his garage, and he said it kept away mosquitoes and flying bugs.
So they are useful.
They are useful, but not in your holes.
To keep the mosquitoes away, put a dick there. I wish, that'd be fantastic.
Cheaper than citronella, probably. Oh, let's sit here.
I have blood type O. Mosquitoes love me. It's sweet and delicious. Terrible. I live in Virginia. I live like right around here. And mosquitoes everywhere.
What other myths have we encountered? Oh, one that I recently had to talk about is coconut oil or any kind of oil lubricant on silicone sex toys. Do you have any like scientific answers as to why nothing happens other than just my experience?
Go on with your experience.
I mean, okay,
You did the experiment.
I just slathered them with coconut oil for hours and waited to see if anything would happen. Nothing happened. Incredibly nothing. Which is what I expected. But still, I left it on there overnight, which is cumulatively enough time, I think, that could represent your average sex toy use over maybe a month or so with coconut oil. And aside from my own personal experience using coconut oil as lube and other people's with silicone sex toys, it's simply not a problem. However, it probably would be a problem if you used it on these type of sex toys. And I think, again, that's like the kind of thing this is where this has all come from, back when they called it silicone, but it was actually TPR. But there was a lot of emphatic words in this blog post that I came across, saying how horrible it was and how it would make it, no, literally nothing happened. I tried it on different densities of silicone, different manufacturers, nothing happened. It's just that simple. It's completely uneventful and no drama.
Yeah, I've tested my silicones that I work with a wide variety of lubricants, and slight swelling is the most exciting thing that ever happened.
And then of course when you use things in your kitchen that are silicone, you're using oil, olive oil, coconut oil.
Silicone spatula, olive oil, coconut oil, you probably do that all the time.
Yeah.
Nothing happens.
And I think that we tend to forget that silicone is silicone, whether it is on your rubber spatula or your sex toy is a rubber spatula. Whatever. It's still the same stuff. It's going to behave the same. It's fine.
And like I was saying earlier, food grade silicones to be food grade have to be tested in oil in an immersion test anyway. So if that didn't go well, you wouldn't have those silicone spatulas.
Right. Any other questions, ideas, thoughts? Yes?
So when it comes to, it's a question about cleaning sex toys. So for things like vibrators, like the Doxy where there's the head is silicone, but you can't obviously oil the whole thing. I know often we tell people to clean it with the 10% bleach solution. As somebody with fragrance allergies and chemical sensitivities, I can't use bleach.
Okay.
So I've been using rubbing alcohol, and I'm not sharing my toys, but I wanted to, because they're mine, I don't want to share anything. So, but I wanted to see if you guys knew anything about rubbing alcohol and how that can impact silicone.
Alcohol is a great disinfectant, and I've never had any problem with it in silicone.
I have seen the occasional manufacturer that tells you not to use it. I wish I had a list because it's only been a couple, and I suspect that it might have something more to do with maybe they have a polyurethane coating on. I don't know. I have never experienced that as an issue. I know that in other circumstances outside of sex toy use, people put together silicone and rubbing alcohol quite frequently, medical community, industrial work. I don't think that it's an issue. But that is if you want to sanitize it, we're not sterilizing. Right. With that, you're sanitizing it. But otherwise, just soap and water will work too. Quite fine.
Silicone is gaskets and machinery. It's tubing and medical stuff. It's implants in your body. Silicone can encounter a lot of things and do absolutely nothing.
And it's gonna be here long after we're gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's so the reason I have this box here protecting this tablecloth, I've yet to encounter a solvent, no matter how restricted or dangerous, that can break this shit down. It's cured and it's done. It doesn't remelt.
What about acetone?
You know the fun thing? So I tested with acetone because I had I used an acetone and ABS solution on my 3D printer bed to adhere the print to the plate. And I put that in a jar. And the acetone dissolved the like little sealy plastic around the lid of the jar. So I was thinking, hey, maybe I can get some silicone in there. And what the silicone did was it absorbed the acetone and became kind of like a little like bologna on a hot plate. Became that little suction cup shape and then fell in. I took it out, I put it on the counter, the acetone came back out of the silicone and no longer smelled like any kind of acetone. And I went, well, I guess that doesn't work, but I have this weird little wafer thing. So silicone can also absorb acetone, and then it'll let it back out and the acetone's gone. And it expands, and then it contracts, the acetone evaporates, and the silicone is no worse for wear.
So we have compared silicone out today to cocaine and bologna.
I would just like to mention that I don't cut my silicone with cocaine. Put that on record.
You cut it with bologna.
Don't give me ideas. So platinum silicone, tincture silicone is inhibited by lack of moisture for its curing. Platinum silicone is inhibited by temperature, and it can also be prevented from curing by the presence of elemental tin or sulfur. And sulfur is in a lot of animal-y things, so bologna probably wouldn't work.
You got a scientific answer for that.
Oil, any kind of oil getting into silicone tends to mess with it a little bit.
During the curing.
Yeah.
But after it's cured, it's fine.
Yeah. It prevents it from doing all the wonderful cross-linky things that make it not that goop and make it into this. But after it's cured, it has no interaction because the reaction is done.
So would you say that it's fair to say that cured silicone is chemically inert?
Yeah, it's pretty much inert. And part of that is because of the strong silicon-oxygen bonds.
Hi, hello. So, y'all talked a little bit about the myth that sex toys that are safe have to be really expensive. We talked about certain ways of cleaning your sex toys. So I wonder if we can combine that a little bit. If you all can talk about the myth that you need some really expensive, fancy product to be able to clean.
You mean like a UV light box?
UV light box. You read my mind.
Did you know that dish soap is readily available in many stores?
Yeah, so this myth that you need something really expensive and really fancy to clean all this dangerous stuff off of your body safe sex toys, and that's the only way you can, because I feel like that's just another way that presents sex toys as something that is not really accessible for a lot of people. Because if you think you have to buy a sex toy that's like $150, and then UV cleaning method, that's another $150. The average person
is going to be scared off by
that.
that.
Yeah. So can you talk about that a little bit?
I mean, one of the ways that we say that you can sanitize your dildos and your butt plugs is toss them in the dishwasher. Please no, we do not want you to add detergent to dishwasher.
Silicone has a very low abrasive strength. That's why your spark plug wires are held up by plastic clips, because if it were rubbing against the surface of the engine block, it's not that it would melt or burn, the engine doesn't get that hot, it would get rubbed off eventually. Silicone gets, if I store a very shiny silicone toy in my pocket with just cloth there, it will lose its shiny finish.
That is definitely an issue, and I don't quite know how we're gonna keep working on that, except to just remind people that yes, 10% bleach is an option. Yes, how many minutes? 10? Okay.
You clean your spatulas at home in your kitchen with soap and water too.
Again, you're not going around your kitchen worrying about your sanitizing. Granted, you're probably not shoving the spatula up your vagina. I say probably. There's going to be somebody who does that, and I'm not shaming you. Yes, the biofilm from your body is an issue and can cause little microorganisms to live there, but still, dish detergent is still going to do that. There are many. We don't need toy cleaner. It's just not something that we need. Rubbing alcohol, bleach, these are things that are readily available, they're cheap, and they do not stick around on the toy and change your pH. I literally went out and bought a pH testing meter and soaked a dildo in alcohol and soaked a dildo in bleach and in warm water and then put them back in clean water and nothing happened. That is another point that the UV company was trying to make, that if you clean these in these terrible chemicals, that you'll just die. I don't know. It'll change your pH and it'll be horrible. It's not a thing that happens. They're creating a problem to sell a product. That's what they're doing.
It is important to note that cleaning and sanitizing are two different things. Cleaning is removing dirt, and sanitizing is killing microorganisms.
Yes.
You clean with soap and water, you sanitize with the dishwasher,
Heat.
like pots and pan settings, boiling, steam autoclave, whatever you've got.
Yes.
When you mentioned if you put a shiny silicone dildo in your pocket, it will be less shiny. So does that mean we shouldn't store them in cloth pouches?
It depends on how much you care about that shininess. Cloth pouches can just buff off the nice shiny sheen. I tend to store things in plastic when I have them, but a lot of dildos also aren't bright and super shiny.
Right.
Like, if they have a matte finish, the cloth isn't going to make them less matte. It's probably going to make them equally matte. But
I mean, anecdotally speaking, I have stored silicone sex toys in cloth bags and not noticed any issues. But then again, a lot of companies that are going to give you a bag are also using that cheap satin-like stuff, so that may be less of an issue.
yeah.
But it is not something that I have personally encountered or had people write to me and have problems about. So,
Thank you.
Speaking of sex toys, like being around forever, can you speak to sort of the best way to dispose of them? So like, you know, if working retail, like if a toy from the rack is busted, you know, where can someone go? What can someone do to properly dispose of them? Because as much as I love sex toys, the idea of like,
There have been companies that did some kind of silicone, like toy recycling. A lot of the ones that I've heard of went out of business, ceased to exist. I don't know if there are ones currently. Silicone is kind of a weird material, but it doesn't melt back down. I don't know how one would go about recycling it.
yeah.
Because it doesn't dissolve in anything, and you can't melt it. It just, like, it is what it is now. So one of the things that I've tried is like every time I pour, I get one of these little sheets from the inside of the bucket. It looks exactly like the inside of the bucket. It's got the same texture because that's how silicone do. I usually use these, one, to wrap around a spatula for mixing the next pour. And two, I tried cutting them up into little bits to make little confetti no-frildos, and that just kept any bubbles from the pouring process of coming up, and they ended up being bubbly. But these are great for painting. If you want to like mix colors on a palette, it doesn't absorb the paint. People in all kinds of workspaces use leftover silicone bucket bits for all sorts of fun stuff.
And right now,
But for
imagining
proper
somebody painting
recycling.
their walls with a silicone dildo. That could be interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there have been those places, but like you said, they've died out. I don't actually know how you would recycle silicone. I don't know what would happen to it. Do you know of any?
Yeah, so I manage Pleasure Chest in the West Village, and our trash company actually will take all the things with a motor in it and recycle it for us.
Okay.
So anyone that does electronic recycling will generally do it with a motor, because people aren't returning things without a motor.
Right.
So like that, I don't know, but like if it has a motor in it, any electronic recycling place can handle it.
But the silicone itself.
I don't know if they do it, but
Erica?
they do something.
Yeah, Come As You Are in Canada is apparently reopening their silicone toy recycling program soon, but that's the only one I know
Now,
of.
is that recycling the material or recycling the toy?
I believe it's recycling the material.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I would love to look into more of that because I have hundreds of these.
I just read an article about some country in Europe who is taking tires and chopping them up and making roads out of them.
Problems that is that like the asphalt and stuff would be
rainbow
on.
dildo balls on playgrounds.
Yeah, like, it's like, let's say for accessibility purposes, like I might wanna go home, but like.
I don't know, that's an area of the industry that is not.
I feel like you're crossing a consent boundary going to Best Buy or the box full of dildos. I feel like that would be the first problem is that everybody's head would explode. Even when, I know when Carlin gets people, disgruntled customers, and they just come in waiting, this toy isn't working, you know, like, first thing I do is put on some gloves and like, you know, kind of shame you a little bit and be like, what are you doing? Yeah, I mean, discreet, regular recycling, I mean, there aren't too many other options.
We called the company and asked them if they're comfortable doing it, because like we weren't sure they were gonna say yes, and they said yes, and I'm sure that like other companies might say no, but I think if you call and ask, I think they'll tell you yes or no. Yeah.
Anybody else? I think we have like, what, a couple minutes left?
Less than 5.
Anybody? Sound good? Yeah, good? Okay. So thank you, Suze, Red Hot Suze,
Yeah, I'm
for
just
helping me do the live stream.
Don't please don't laugh. How was that? Oh my god. I did nothing.
And like I said, I have it up on Twitter where in case all the things that I have briefly touched on, I have, a lot of these I have written entire long winding blog posts about. So all of those links are available, danedressily.com/platinum-myths. And you'll find more info there.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to see my drawers, you may come up and see them. And at some point today, I don't know when, we will figure it out, we're going to burn in some sex toys.